He once had it all: wealth, status, a family that adored him. But when addiction took hold, everything spiraled. One night, on the cold streets of the city, he reached into a trash bin to survive, and just as he brought the food to his lips, a child's voice stopped him. "Don't eat that!" What followed wasn't just a fall, it was a rebirth, triggered by the compassion of someone with nothing left to give. He kneeled down beside the dumpster, his suit wrinkled, face hollow, hands shaking. The city lights blurred behind the tears welling in his eyes. Just hours ago, people still called him Sir. Now no one even looked twice, except for the rats and the shadows. Michael reached into the trash, eyes fixed on a half-eaten sandwich pressed against a greasy napkin. His stomach growled louder than the traffic. The smell didn't faze him anymore. He was about to take a bite when a voice cut through the darkness. "Don't eat that!" He froze. The voice was small, urgent. A boy, maybe 9, maybe younger, standing a few feet away, arms crossed, barefoot on the cold pavement. Michael stared at him, stunned. "You'll get sick," the boy added, softer this time. He walked closer, pulled a stale piece of bread from his own pocket, and held it out. "Take this instead." Michael's hand trembled as he accepted the gift. Something cracked inside him, something pride had buried for decades. This wasn't about food. It was about dignity. That single moment, that single voice, would become the start of everything he never expected. How did this unexpected compassion rewrite a destiny? This journey will captivate you. Subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss a single moment of this thrilling story and become part of something bigger. Discover the power of a second chance. You won't want to miss out. Michael Reeves wasn't always invisible. For most of his life, he was the man people noticed when he walked into a room. Tall, confident, always dressed sharply. He made success look easy. He was a senior marketing executive in a high-rise office overlooking downtown Chicago. His colleagues respected him, his clients trusted him, and his family, well, they used to admire him. Behind that polished image, though, Michael was a storm waiting to break. Raised by a single mother in a trailer park, he'd grown up with empty pantries and promises that next month will be better. From a young age, he swore to never be poor again. That vow burned into him. It pushed him to graduate top of his class, climb the corporate ladder, and build a life where he never had to look back. But that same fire also made him blind. Obsessed with control, terrified of failure, and emotionally distant, he masked his fears with arrogance. His wife, Sarah, tried for years to break through. So did his kids. But Michael believed love was proven by providing, not presence. What no one knew, what he couldn't even admit to himself, was that he had developed a gambling habit. It started as a thrill. Then it became a way to escape. And before long, it became a cage. Still, he kept up the act, smiling at meetings, buying gifts he couldn't afford, telling himself it was all under control, until the day it wasn't. Michael didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to erase the past. He dreamed of building a life so far removed from the hunger and hand-me-downs of his childhood that no one, not even himself, could remember where he came from. That dream had a shape. A luxury home in the suburbs, a new SUV every 3 years, private school for his kids, 5-star vacations. But more than things, Michael longed for something he could never quite name. Maybe it was respect. Maybe it was to finally feel safe. He worked non-stop, chasing every promotion like a man being hunted. His colleagues admired his drive, but his family saw something else. Sarah noticed how he avoided real conversations, how he'd come home late and retreat into silence. The kids learned not to ask too many questions. Still, on the surface, things were good. His social media painted the perfect picture. Michael posting photos at galas, his family smiling in front of ski lodges. He was the guy people envied, the one who made it. The gambling started small. A few sports bets with friends, then poker nights, then online betting apps that promised instant returns. It wasn't about the money, it was about the high, about feeling in control of something when everything else felt hollow. He told himself it was just stress relief, that everyone had a vice. But soon he was moving money between accounts, skipping mortgage payments, lying to Sarah. His job became harder to focus on. He started missing deadlines, snapping at co-workers. Still, he convinced himself it was temporary. All he needed was one big win, one break, one miracle, because in his mind, the dream wasn't broken, it was just delayed, and he'd do anything to keep the illusion alive. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday. Michael had wired nearly $15,000 from his company's account to cover a massive betting loss from the weekend. He planned to return it before anyone noticed, just a temporary fix, he told himself. But finance caught the irregularity within hours. By Wednesday, he was sitting across from his boss, Greg Thompson, in a sterile office that suddenly felt like a courtroom. "We trusted you," Greg said, voice low but burning. "You're done here." The HR rep watched silently as Michael signed the termination papers. No severance, no reference, just a box for his things and a security escort out the building. He didn't go home. Instead, he walked the streets for hours, trying to rehearse what he'd say to Sarah. How could he explain the lies, the missing money, the risks he'd taken with their future? When he finally walked through the door that night, Sarah didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at him and said, "I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how bad." In the days that followed, everything unraveled. Sarah moved out with the kids. Creditors started calling. Friends stopped answering. Daniel, his closest friend since college, blocked his number. The house went into foreclosure within 3 months. His savings were gone. Every job application led nowhere. Word of his firing had spread, and no one wanted to touch a disgraced executive with a gambling record. Michael couch-surfed for a while. Then came the shelters. Then the street. Each day was colder than the last. Not just the weather, but the silence from everyone who once said they'd always be there. He told himself it wasn't forever, that he'd bounce back. But with each passing week, that belief faded, and when the pain became too heavy to carry, he stopped trying to fix it. He'd just survived. Michael had stopped counting the days. They all looked the same. Gray, damp, endless. Mornings on a park bench, nights under an overpass. The city that once buzzed beneath his office window now growled around him, a constant reminder of everything he lost. He avoided eye contact. That was rule number 1. Looking people in the eyes gave them a chance to judge you, or worse, pity you. He'd rather be invisible. Sometimes he'd catch his reflection in a store window and not recognize himself. The beard, the hollow cheeks, the coat 3 sizes too big. He looked like a ghost pretending to be human. Eating was a game of luck. If he could find a church giving out food or a stranger kind enough to share, he ate. If not, he didn't. He grew used to the ache. It became background noise. But that night was different. It was past 10. Most restaurants had closed, and the dumpsters had been picked clean. Michael was desperate. He walked behind a sandwich shop and spotted a bag, half open. Inside, a smashed sub, still partly wrapped. His hands trembled as he reached for it. Then came the voice. "Don't eat that!" Michael froze. He turned and saw a kid, barefoot, wearing a hoodie that hung off his thin frame like a blanket. He looked no older than 9. Michael stared at him, stunned. "You'll get sick," the boy said. "Here, I have this." He pulled a crumpled piece of bread from his pocket and held it out. Michael didn't move. "I ate already," the boy lied. "You can have it." Michael took it, hands shaking. "What's your name?" "Jaden. Where are your parents?" The boy shrugged. "Gone." Something broke inside Michael. The boy had nothing, yet he gave, without hesitation. He remembered his own childhood, his mother skipping meals so he could eat, the promise he made never to be hungry again. And now here he was, worse than hungry. He was hollow, forgotten, alone. Except he wasn't. Jaden sat next to him on the curb, silent. not asking for anything. Michael took a bite of the stale bread. It was the best thing he'd tasted in years, not because it filled his stomach, but because, for the first time in forever, it fed something deeper. Moments like these remind us of the power of an encounter, of a single word. If Michael's journey so far has touched your heart, show your support by liking. And if you've experienced or witnessed a transformative act of compassion, share your thoughts in the comments. Stories connect us. They sat in silence for a while, Michael and Jaden, two strangers bound by something deeper than words: loss, hunger, invisibility. "Where do you sleep?" Michael asked quietly. "Wherever it's dry," Jaden replied. "Sometimes in that alley, sometimes under the bridge." Michael stared at the pavement. He thought he'd known rock bottom. But here was a child, surviving the same streets he barely endured. And somehow, the kid still had enough heart left to care about someone else. "You remind me of my dad," Jaden said suddenly. Michael turned to him, startled. He used to wear a suit, too. He died 2 winters ago. He was trying to get clean, but the cold got him first. The words hit like a punch to the chest. Michael had never met Jaden's father, but he could see him in his desperation, in his exhaustion. And in that moment, Michael saw himself, not just the man he was, but the man he could become if he stayed on this path. "I'm not ready to die out here," he whispered. Jaden didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, Michael walked to a local shelter. They turned him away at first. It was full, but he didn't give up. He waited. He asked questions. He found a smaller outreach group run by a former addict named Carlos. Michael's journey didn't start with a grand plan. It started with stale bread and a boy who still believed people could be saved. Carlos didn't ask too many questions. He handed Michael a clean shirt, a toothbrush, and pointed him to a cot in the back of the shelter's basement. "Sleep. We'll talk tomorrow," he said. That night, Michael lay awake, surrounded by strangers, the scent of damp concrete and disinfectant thick in the air. But for the first time in months, he wasn't outside. He wasn't cold. He wasn't invisible. The next morning, Carlos introduced him to the shelter's daily routine: chores, meetings, job readiness classes. At first, Michael resisted. He didn't think he belonged with the others. In his mind, he was different, but over time he realized the truth. He wasn't special. And that was liberating. Pain, shame, addiction, none of it discriminated. He started showing up early for breakfast, sweeping floors before being asked. He listened in group sessions even when it hurt. And slowly he spoke. About the lies, the gambling, the betrayal. No one judged him. They'd all been there too. He wrote every night. Pages of memories, guilt and gratitude. It was Jaden who filled most of those pages. The boy who gave him a piece of bread and unknowingly opened a door he didn't think existed anymore. Each day felt fragile, but it was a beginning. And this time, Michael was holding on with both hands. Recovery wasn't a straight line. Some mornings, Michael woke up with clarity. Others, he woke up with shame clinging to his chest like smoke. One afternoon, after a long shift washing dishes at a diner that partnered with the shelter, he passed by a betting kiosk. He stopped just for a second. The rush came back instantly. The promise, the control, the lie. He stepped inside. His hand hovered over his wallet. Then he heard it again. "Don't eat that," Jaden's voice. So vivid it made him flinch. Michael backed out of the kiosk, breath shallow, shame rising. That night he told Carlos everything. Carlos didn't scold him. "We fall," he said. "The trick is learning how to get up faster each time." Michael clung to that advice. Weeks passed, then months. He had setbacks, panic attacks, nights when the silence felt louder than any crowd. But he kept writing, kept working, kept showing up. And when the shelter asked if he'd be willing to speak at a public event about recovery, he said yes. His first speech was shaky. His hands trembled. But when he mentioned the boy with the bread, the room went silent. That story, more than anything else, reminded them all, change starts with the smallest acts. The auditorium was full, but Michael only saw one face, Jaden. He sat in the second row, wearing clean clothes, a new backpack slung over his chair. His hair was trimmed, his shoes matched. He looked safe. Michael had just finished sharing his story to a group of high school students, part of an outreach program led by the same shelter that once saved him. He hadn't seen Jaden in over a year. And now, here he was, clapping softly, eyes shining. After the talk, Michael stepped down from the stage, heart pounding harder than it ever had in any boardroom. "You clean up nice," Jaden said with a grin. Michael laughed, tears already forming. You're really here." "I got placed with a foster family," Jaden said. "The shelter helped. Said someone kept talking about me in their speeches." Michael knelt down to eye level. "You saved me," he whispered. "I don't know if you understand what that bread did. What you did." Jaden shrugged. "It was just bread." "No," Michael said. "It was everything." They hugged, not just out of gratitude or affection, but out of recognition. Two lives that had touched at their lowest point, now standing in the light. That moment changed Michael again. He realized his story wasn't just about him. It was about the invisible, the discarded, the ones who fall through the cracks. He went home that night and wrote a mission statement. Not for a business, but for a future. He'd call it the Breadline Project, a non-profit dedicated to helping the homeless not only survive, but rebuild. Counseling, job training, mentorship, and above all, dignity. Michael no longer wanted to erase his past. He wanted to honor it. And Jaden, he became the first volunteer. What makes a man fall isn't always greed or weakness. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's the fear of asking for help. Michael learned that too late, but not so late that he couldn't turn back. The greatest lesson he carried wasn't about loss. It was about dignity. Dignity isn't something you earn by status or wealth. It's something you recognize in others, even when they've lost everything, especially then. It took a child with nothing in his pockets to remind a grown man what compassion looks like. Michael used to think strength meant never showing pain. Now he knows it's the courage to admit you're broken, and the humility to accept help when it's offered. Not everyone gets a second chance, and those who do often don't see it when it comes. But Michael's second chance came in the shape of a stale piece of bread and a voice saying, "Don't eat that." That moment became his anchor. It taught him that even in the darkest places, one act of kindness can plant the seed of a new life, and sometimes the smallest voice carries the greatest power. Today, Michael lives in a modest apartment not far from the shelter where his life restarted. He still wears a suit sometimes, but now it's for meetings with donors, city officials and volunteers. The Breadline Project has grown. What began with a single story now feeds hundreds, physically, emotionally and spiritually. They offer workshops, housing support, therapy and most importantly, connection. Michael's speeches are no longer about shame. They're about survival, rebirth, and the power of human kindness. People listen, not because he once had money, but because he lost it all and came back different. Sarah eventually let him back into her life, not as her husband, but as the father of their children. Michael never asked for more. He just shows up. Soccer games, birthdays, weekends, and they see the man he's become. Jaden, he's thriving. He speaks at events too now. His story, like Michael's, has become a beacon. They still meet every month, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to walk the same streets where everything began. And every time they pass that alley, Michael glances at the spot by the dumpster, not with shame, but with gratitude, because that's where his life truly began. How close have you come to your own breaking point? Have you ever reached for something, out of hunger, out of desperation, and been stopped by a voice you didn't expect? Michael's story isn't rare. It happens quietly, in every city, every day. People fall, people disappear. But sometimes someone notices. Sometimes a single voice changes everything. Maybe you've been that voice. Maybe you need to hear one right now. Either way, this isn't just a story. It's a mirror. So if this moved you, leave a comment below. Share the moment that changed you, the person who showed up when no one else did, or tell us where you are right now, even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy, because healing starts with being seen. Subscribe if you believe in second chances. Share this video if you know someone who needs to remember that their story isn't over. And next time you walk past someone who looks lost, don't just keep walking. Sometimes all it takes is a few words. Don't eat that. Simple, human, powerful.